were supplanted by Ahmed Said Kimani, and he was the one who was put on. He was the one who actually made it into the assembly. So slowly, in that sense, events like this also alerted industrial workers to the fact that they needed to have some kind of alternative form of organizing and some alternative spaces, because traditional establishment की politics में उनके लिए जगह ढूंढना बहुत मुश्किल होगा, क्योंकि things like this election showed them that they'll be removed even if वो सही तौर पे जीत गए हैं. So at this point in time, what you had was then Mirza Muhammad Ibrahim and the other group, which of course Musa will be able to tell us much more about, Bashir Ahmed Bakhtiyar, formed their own federations as well. So you had the All Pakistan Confederation of Labour and you had the Pakistan Trade Union Federation, right? So it looked like you were going to have a rich space for labour politics, right? So if you look at the beginning of the 1950s, it looked like you were going to have rich space for labour politics in Lahore. Unfortunately, at this point, what we don't end up considering then is international events. And the international environment, particularly that of the Cold War, meant that the Muslim League was very eager to show that हमारे यहाँ communist के लिए कोई जगह नहीं है. So APCOL was actually smarter. So in the 1950s, APCOL changed its constitution to reflect the fact that, it took the term socialism out of its constitution. And simultaneously in 1954, when the Communist Party was banned, the Pakistan Trade Union Federation was banned outright because it was considered to be part of the communist fronts that were operating at that point in time. So then, again, the narrative switches in the same way that we discussed 1947. The narrative becomes 1954 में communistों की movement खत्म हो गई, right? Which is actually not true either. Because at that point in time, realizing that even in the face of extremely bad odds, you can have certain survival strategies that allow your movement to continue is very important. And one of the survival strategies that many of these people came up with was to move into the Azad Pakistan Party and then eventually later into the National Awami Party. So the National Awami Party starts housing these people who can't fight on any other platform. If you look at the newspapers from this time, what you see is that even though the Pakistan Trade Union Federation is technically banned, and so the Bata workers, the Anjuman Bint Mulazmeen, where all of them shift and say that we are now part of APCOL, you see that Mirza Muhammad Ibrahim is still involved, right? He's still, and Faiz Ahmed Faiz in fact, are still pushing forward the demands of Bata workers who are striking in the early 60s and late 1950s. So 1957 is one incident in which you have one massive strike that takes place, and people who technically should not know one another, but were connected through those older networks, are still part of the main platforms that are presenting their demands to the editorials at that point in time. So in that sense, this continuity is established throughout the period of the late 1950s and continuing on until the 1960s. It is not, however, until you come to the movement against Ayub Khan, so we've skipped forward quite a bit, that you really see a different group of people emerging. Now, this different group of people is actually younger people, and younger people who feel that the old leadership and the old cadres are stopping them from expanding and are stopping them from, putting forward their more radical demands. These younger people's demands are also highlighted at this point in time because what you have in Lahore is a new player, right? And that new player is Zulfikar Ali Bhutto at this point. And so what you have is a sudden switch. The old constituency that we discussed in 1951 that would have gone to Mirza Muhammad Ibrahim, this time goes to Dr. Mubashir Ahmed. And that, of course, there are many conflicting stories told of this time. But reports suggest that it was, workers felt that Mirza Muhammad Ibrahim had been too conciliatory at this point, and so they decided to sort of switch their allegiance. But what you have, so this is the national story and the international story of the Cold War. But if you look at Lahore's own little city story, right, what is happening is that Lahore's development throughout the 1960s has been shifting from the north of Lahore, which is where the area we've been focusing on so far, to the south of Lahore, where you have Kotakpur, right? You have the packages factory, 57. You have Biko shifting its establishment there in the 60s as well. And slowly, there is also, so the Pakistan Labour Code has several cases which suddenly come up in the 1960s of Bata workers complaining that the tannery that the Bata factory has opened up in Kot Lakhpat is actually a ploy. It's opened up as a ploy to, I don't know how true this is, so I'm just telling you what the claim was. It's opened up as a ploy because the more permanent workers who are in the Bata factory were causing problems by being involved in all this labor politics. So उन्हें remove करके उनके contracts खत्म करके उन्हें वहाँ डाल रहे थे as temporary, as casual labor. And so they didn't have rights through the Factory Acts as they had before as permanent labor. So while this switch is happening, what we see is technically you could see the south of Lahore as a new development. But if these older factories are also being switched there, and certain establishments are being switched there that used to exist before, and some of their workers are being moved there, that knowledge of mobilization is moving with them, right? So the knowledge of mobilization means that you would expect that packages, which is newer, would have less strikes to begin with than PICO, which is the older factory. And it appears that in the beginning of the movement, at least, this is how it proceeded. So when factory workers start coming out into the streets to say that Ayub Khan needs to be removed, you have a group of workers who are protesting mainly from the PICO factory in Kot Lakhpat, and they pass the packages workers factory, or they present them with mehndi and churiyan and say कि आप लोग तोड़ते हैं और इसलिए आप नहीं आ सकते. Of course, for feminists, this is a very problematic characterization anyway. लेकिन उस वक्त के लिए, it was showing the people at that point, or showing the workers at that point in time, that you need to be involved as well. This, according to interview accounts and, in fact, newspaper accounts of the period, seems to be one of the reasons that motivated the packages workers to be involved as well. But again, perhaps this would not have been possible if it hadn't been for this longer, continuous knowledge of mobilization being passed on, these networks being passed on, and in that sense, the shift in politics that we see from the 70s is not just a shift of national ideology, of the state, it's also a shift in generation. And a generation that has a different way of viewing what their role within Pakistan is and what the position of industrial workers within that is. And I think one of the ways in which we need to be able to think about our mobilization that happens in the more contemporary period in relation to some of the lessons that we can see from what happened in this time period is also that you need to be able to see the reasons why some people will side with one faction as opposed to another. It's not based in irrationality. It is based on concerns that younger people have about what their main demands are, what the conditions of their life are, right? For people like Mirza Muhammad Ibrahim, who was much older by the time the 1969 movement emerged out onto the street, he had seen a long history of repression. He had seen the fact that in spite of him trying to bring these radical demands onto the stage, he hadn't been able to mobilize as much because he'd been incarcerated throughout, right? So if you look at accounts of him ranging from Khalid Mahmood's account to Nayab Naqvi's account, what you will see is that there is a great amount of admiration for Mirza Muhammad Ibrahim and the radical politics that he was part of. But they are also cognizant of the fact that because of his radical politics, he became a target by the state. And so in that sense, maybe what is referred to, and the terms are very interesting, right? So they keep saying that one side was Mirza Muhammad Ibrahim, who was, and it varies, so they say Ishtiraki Pasand, Neem Ishtiraki, Inqilabi Pasand, whereas the other side is Islam, right? So you're revisionist automatically, or reformist. But that's not actually what's going on. And Mirza Muhammad Ibrahim and Bashir Ahmed Bakhtiyar were able to work together. Whenever these movements came about, whenever 1969 happened, when the 67 railway strike happened, throughout this point in time, what you had was them and their workers coming out on a common platform, in spite of what their differences were, zati taur pe. So what that really shows us is that they put mobilization first. And when Mirza Muhammad Ibrahim comes to the point where he has that conflict, where he's eventually ousted by the PPP in the form of Dr. Mubashir Hassan, that does not necessarily mean that his brand of politics ends. Because that brand of politics for him has actually changed. He himself, by that point, was willing to be more conciliatory toward the government, regardless of what people may say about he sold out, didn't sell out. You have to also imagine that this man spent his entire life organizing on behalf of these industrial workers at great cost to himself personally. So I think these kind of lessons, I don't think I can give anyone any overarching lesson. It's not like I'm that knowledgeable or anything. But what I can say is that these lessons show us that there's subtleties in the factions that you think may mean one thing on the surface. They may mean something very different for people as individuals when you see them involved in a more atomized sense within the movement. And so with that, I think we're just going to wrap up and pass it on to Nazrul. Thank you so much.
Because they want the full form of act